When you hear the phrase soft as steel, what do you think of? While the word steel might conjure up images such as massive high-rise buildings, where does the soft part come in? And what exactly does this mean in our work and in our lives? Welcome to the Soft as Steel podcast with your host, Dennis Duran, featuring engaging conversations with a wide range of industry leaders around soft skills, how we practice love, inclusion, social justice, and compassionate leadership that's everlasting in the workplace. And now, here's Dennis Duran.
My special guest today is Bob Swanson. I asked Bob to share a few facts about himself for me to use in introducing him, and he did. In very simple and direct fashion, here are the facts about Bob Swanson. Retired in 2015 after working in the construction industry for a mere 45 years. President of Swanson Youngdale Incorporated the last 25 years of his career. Swanson and Youngdale is a national painting and decorating contractor, one of the most highly regarded in the upper Midwest for sure. Suicide loss survivor. Oldest son Michael died by suicide on March 13, 2009 at the age of 33. 4 adult children, and 10 grandchildren. Those are the facts about my good friend. And let me just say on a personal note, this gentleman you're going to enjoy listening to for the next 30 minutes is one of the finest human beings I've ever had the privilege to come to know. You know, it makes me sad even to say the words out loud and to give not simply a hint, but as you're listening, you might well be able to know what Bob is going to be talking about during our conversation. And in simple terms, he's going to be talking about a continuing crisis in the construction industry that needs to be talked about. So Bob, with a smile back on my face, welcome to the Soft as Steel podcast.
Thank you, Dennis, and I'm looking forward to this, and it's always good to see you.
Thank you. So Bob, you know this podcast series is the next chapter in my journey to carry the message about people in our industry, about the people side of our business, more specifically about what I refer to and you understand very well, in fact, to such a point that you could probably talk about soft skills better than I can, and in particular, in the terms that the folks boots on the ground understand, because you lived it, you practiced it, it's who you are. Your qualities are what has made you successful in your career, has made you successful in your life, and has made it possible for you to deal with unbearable grief. The first question I want to ask you to kind of just get our conversation underway, and I'll also say that there are going to be a number of episodes in the Soft as Steel podcast series that'll be dealing with this topic. You are the first, and in my personal estimation, the most important. I recall vividly how you stood in front of a group in Las Vegas a number of years ago and shared your story about your son and his demise, and the fact that every eye in the room, notably the eyes of the leadership of a building trades union, were brought to tears as you talked about your son and what he and you had experienced. Why do we need to keep talking about this, Bob, in the construction industry, in your view? Why?
Well, it's a hard industry, and we're so focused on getting the job done. It's kind of in our DNA, where we neglect our own personal needs in doing that. We neglect talking about how you're doing, making sure everybody's okay. And I lived that, I must say, pretty strongly, because that's the industry I grew up in that we're just focused on, we got a job to do, we got a schedule to meet, and we don't have time to worry about all that other stuff. And unfortunately, there's lots of downsides to that attitude, and it's hard to change, but we need to change.
Mm-hmm. Turn the clock back quickly just for a minute to when you moved into, let's call it, leadership in the industry by virtue of your position. Were you the same person then in terms of your view, your feeling, your embracing this notion of the qualities of people and soft skills as you are today?
No, I was not, but part of that was the era we lived in. I became president in 1990. It would have been a sign of weakness for me as a leader of a company to say, geez, Dennis, how are you doing today? You don't quite look like you're at the top of your game. I mean, it would have been totally unacceptable. Let's put it that way. Mm-hmm. So part of it is the era that I was in. I'll even go back in the 60s when I started in this business. And then at that point, I was a field painter. You just didn't talk at all about your feelings at all. Manhood, you don't talk about it. And as I grew up as in a family that my dad was in the industry, back to that, I remember as a young boy, big boys don't cry, bury your feelings. And all that was so embedded in my DNA and most of my fellow workers' DNA. So I was not the person that I am today. I've learned a lot. Thankfully, I've grown. But when I first became a leader of the company in 1990, it was just go get them, get the job done. And that I didn't even worry about anything else.
Yeah. So back then, what was motivation all about? How did you motivate people back in those days?
Well, I think I motivated being clear about what needed to be done, being clear about how to get there. But I think I've always listened to people that have a job to do and get their input and get their buy-in. And then it's a we. I never looked at whatever title I had that I was any better than anybody else. I always used to say, I just got a different job, different responsibilities. But if I don't do my job, I impact you negatively. And if you don't do your job, you impact me negatively. So it was always a we. And I just always wanted to get input from people. And a lot of times I didn't even know what the solution was. It's like, I think leaders really betray themselves when they think they have all the answers. The people you're leading most of the time have the answers. And it's just a matter of pulling that out and guiding them along.
And to say the least, you're a very humble person. But I'm going to ask you this question anyway. If I were to ask someone who worked for you 30 or 35 years ago to describe what kind of a person you were in their eyes, what do you think they would say?
Well, I would hope they'd say Bob is a very caring person. He cares about my well-being. Bob never expects more out of any of us than he expects out of himself. He's fair. And those are some qualities I guess I would expect or hope that people thought of me.
Mm-hmm. So you just used three words that are qualities, are soft skills, to describe what people would say about you. And this is 30 to 35 years ago. So your thought is, as you reflect back, on the one hand, and I think very correctly, you described the nature of the immediate workplace, the job site, and what interacting with people to get them to get the job done was all about. But by the same token, how you did it, even all those years ago. And I think I'd love to get someone to do a cameo appearance and come on and say, well, let me tell you about Bob Swanson 30, 35 years ago. Someone that knew you then, and I'm certain, because I feel like I know you fairly well. I'm certain they would use those very words you used. In fact, you probably recall, one of the things that I put in my book was, a question to ask the reader. What do you think people would say about you? And I think that just suggests that you, as a member of our generation, had an implicit understanding about the fact that at a minimum, in dealing with people, if you want to get them to do what you need to do on a consistent basis, you got to demonstrate that you care. The other term in construction might be that you give a shit. Excuse my French, but that's construction terminology. Reasonable and fairness. That those are akin to that higher plane where you talk about having integrity, being honest, being trustworthy. Do you think people that work for you when you were in leadership in your company, do you think people that expected if you said it, that's what he meant and he would do what he said?
I would hope so. And I think I tried my best to always adhere to that. I'm like any other human being. There were probably times I didn't adhere to that for various reasons. But if I said something that I was going to do, I meant to do it within all reason. And sometimes there might have been extenuating circumstances. But if I told somebody, hey, we're going to get this equipment, or I'm going to make sure we get something done. And I had that same feeling towards our customers. I felt my word was my bond. And if I told a customer we as a company were going to accomplish something, I expected that to happen. And I didn't think twice that we couldn't do it. And in the same hand with employees and suppliers, I had a lot of good relationships, and that's the other thing. You need a lot of partners to make this work. It was never about me. It was never about just me and just the company, but we had great partners, many suppliers that helped the company succeed. Our labor partner, and just a lot, and look even at the apprenticeship program, and it's just so many different partners and pieces that make it all come together.
Yeah. So you mentioned relationships, which, as you know, is to me is the end game. You need to be a good person to work for or work with in order to be able to build long-lasting relationships. And I think you, by what you're saying, you would agree with that. When you think, so again, thinking back, as time progressed from 30 to 35 years ago, let's just capture that chunk of it. As time progressed, how you went about building and maintaining relationships with a variety of partners, whether they were suppliers, subcontractors. You alluded to the union as your labor partner. Did how you went about building and maintaining those relationships change as new generations of people came into your equation? Or you've been doing it the same?
I think by and large, I did it the same my whole career. I must say, as people changed, that it was challenging, but always exciting. So, as you know, over time, people get promoted, people retire, etc. Now you got a new face. Well, you can't just go on your old laurels. Geez, I'm Bob Swanson, and I'm so darn good, and nice to meet you, Dennis. That doesn't get you anywhere. We had to start at square one. So I always found that challenging but exciting. Here, I got a new supplier representative here, or a new business rep, or a new employee, new general contractor I've never dealt with. And I got to just start at ground zero, build a relationship. And the first, let's face it, it's built on trust. And usually the trust was from a general contractor. We got to get something done, and I better darn well make it happen. With a supplier, it was kind of the reverse. You better get my paint on the job site when I want it, or we're going to have a problem. And then it was honesty. Nobody likes surprises. So it was like, maybe we couldn't get the right equipment for something. Well, tell the contractor ahead of time. I got a problem. We've got to get this done, but here's my problem. How can we work it out? Same with a supplier coming to me and saying, I can't get you all the materials. So honesty is really the base of building those relationships. So I found it kind of exciting to have new people, and we just started square one again.
Mm-hmm. So, if you were to think about, take a look at generations for a minute. Again, we're both baby boomers. So if you didn't already know that I embrace this notion of soft skills and people's qualities and why it's so important, and why relationships are the key to success, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But you wanted to say to your fellow member of the baby boomer generation. Here's a couple of things that we keep doing that are making it more difficult for us to transition and connect to the generations that are behind us. So fellow baby boomer, here are a couple of suggestions on things that we as a generation need to try to understand, need to be done differently to be able to have progress in our industry.
Well, let's step back that 30, 35 years ago. It was a lot of yelling and screaming. That doesn't work. Intimidation, that doesn't work. So I could sense before I retired, and I've been retired now 7 years, the newer employees, the younger employees, I had to listen that they're motivated by different things. So, and again, as a fellow boomer, things many times were out of balance in my life. I gave my job my all, and now looking back, that was some things I neglected. One was my personal health. One was many times my family. And I regret that. But at the time, I didn't know any better. So I really recognize the newer generation today is kind of saying, and work isn't everything. I got a life. And I've taken I listened to that and said, that makes some sense. But we got a job also, so how do we balance that? And I think I started before I retired, tried to be more flexible. But I must say, as a leader of a company, it was always that we got to get a job done. So that's always the tension. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. So, in short, and you nailed it, as I knew you would. I probably should interject. This is intended to be a conversation. I didn't dream these questions up like yesterday. They're just, and you know me well enough to know that sometimes I do fly by the seat of my pants. But what you just said basically is that we as a generation need to recognize that we're different than the younger generation. That what motivated us was blunt force when we were coming up, and that just doesn't work anymore because now we call it harassment and job site safety issues. And so we just need to be accepting of that new reality and make sure that we don't miss the opportunity to pass along, both from a technical standpoint as well as from a relationship standpoint, all the best things that we can to help them. Does that sum it up for you?
It sure does, Dennis.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about, now move more into the topic of the facts that you've provided me with regard specifically to the loss of your son, to mental health and suicide. Well, when you began, you basically turned to a new chapter in your life at his passing. Share with our audience about the what, the why, and what you've done just in a general way from that point forward to deal with this, and in a way that is intended to help folks.
Sure. Well, first off, losing a child, and it doesn't matter if it's suicide or a disease, a traffic accident, it's unbelievably devastating as a parent. I can't put it in words, because until you experience it, it doesn't make sense. It's like your whole world got blown up. Every premise that I had prior to that, provide and protect your family, was drubbed into me as a young man. It blew up. I lost a son. And then suicide deaths even harder because it doesn't make sense. What was going on? How much distress was our son in? I still pain over that, and I'll never heal from it. So, and thankfully, I have a strong faith. But for a few years after Michael's death, I was very angry at the God I believe in. I had a lot of guilt. Those questions of why me, why us? We were trying to lead a good life. Why did this happen? Why didn't I go instead of my son? All those questions. And it was a long journey of a few years through prayer. I just said, what am I supposed to do with this? And through prayer and through other people, it was like, you need to talk about this. And it's like, I don't want to sound like I'm so darn good, but it was almost like I was chosen. This is my new calling. The other piece, when you lose a child, a lot of things that motivated me and made sense before don't even make no sense anymore. A good example, I was an avid sports fan of all of our professional teams. Today, I could care less. It doesn't mean anything. Another thing, I loved to drive. I had a Corvette, enjoyed it immensely. After Michael's death, it sat in the garage for 4 years. Finally, I sold it. It didn't mean anything anymore. So my things that count now is so much people, even more than before. So as far as what I've been doing the last 7 years, I got involved with a group called Construction Alliance. And again, all this, I don't want to sound like I'm being too religious, but I know my God is guiding this. I have done no marketing. People just come out of the blue. I've spoken to construction companies all around the United States, labor unions. And today I've got a presentation to, in addition to this, to NAMI, Minnesota. We have total misunderstanding of what people living with mental illness and substance use is all about. We blame them. I blame myself as Michael was on his journey. I mean, we lived this journey for over a decade before his death. Actually, I would say 2 decades. We didn't know it. And I blame myself. Well, that's crazy. He blamed himself. He said, Dad, why can't I get this figured out? Well, it'd be like someone with cancer saying, why can't I get this figured out? Nobody wants these diseases. They're illnesses, but they're all treatable, but we have so much shame around it. Our family lived with shame through this whole journey, and it took me going through a support group just to say the words, our oldest son died by suicide. I mean, today those words can come out much easier, but the first few times it was like, I couldn't say them. They couldn't come out. It's because there was so much shame around that. So I want to give people the hope that we can put emphasis on still getting the job done, but let's take care of our people. Let's take care of our friends, our neighbors, and we'll all be better off. And it's just sometimes that reaching out and saying, how you doing? You don't look like you're okay. Can we talk about it? And once we provide that safe space, it allows people to talk about it. It's huge, but they're just little easy steps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Bobby, you and I both are old enough that we remember what the outlook of the industry was, and I'm referring specifically to our construction industry, with regards to personal safety. It's a word, and it's a word that's been around for decades. But decades ago, safety was just, do you want it fast or do you want it safe? And that's, and again, if you disagree with that characterization from decades back, then I'd love to hear your thoughts. But that's kind of the view that I saw was quality, safety. Does the best quality cost more if you have to be safe to produce it? All those kinds of things. Do you remember those kinds of conversations decades ago?
Oh, decades ago, here was the common statement. This is a dangerous job. Be careful. What the heck does that mean? We had no tools, no PPE, poor training. It was just be careful and get the job done, and I want it done by tonight.
Yeah.
Well, that, of course, everybody cut corners. But we did. I look back, I was in the painting industry. When I first got in the industry, we didn't even wear respirators because we didn't know any better. Right. And you'd spray until you got sick. Yeah. And then you'd go out and relieve that out of your system and then come back and spray. And it was looked at like, what are you, some kind of wuss if you got to use a respirator? And geez, guys working on swing stages with no tie back. It was crazy. And of course, people got killed and injured. And it was just like, well, they weren't careful.
So Bob, you need to calm down. You're getting a little wound up.
Okay.
Is there an analogy here to personal safety and mental health, addiction, et cetera? Is there an analogy in terms of where our industry it may be and where they're going and whether we're getting there fast enough and with proper steps? What do you think?
Well, first off, we're not getting there fast enough. I think the analogy would be, at some point, everybody in the industry said, we have a safety problem and we have to fix it. I think we're very close to saying, as an industry, we have a personal safety problem in addressing mental health, substance use disorder, etc. So I would put, in that regard, we're very close to that apex where we're going to start doing something about it. Mm-hmm. And I hear a lot of, when I speak, a lot of contractors really do want to address the issue, just don't know how to get there. And mm-hmm. I think we were the same way at one point with safety. Okay, I know we need to address safety. I know we need to do a better job. And I can relate even back, this would be about in the 1980s, but how do we do this? Mm-hmm. And that's good that we're at that same point and ready to do something about it, Dennis.
Yeah, I would agree. You're a good friend and someone that I've gotten to know a little bit. Cal Byers does great work in this regard, and he'll be a guest on my podcast as well. But I wanted to start. I didn't want to. I needed to start with you because not only have you lived a life of service, really your entire career, and you went from serving the people that work for you for decades. And now you're serving people that can be helped by what you say, and you do it with the words you use to describe yourself. The first word you use when I said, well, how people describe you, you use the word caring, and that really is why your credibility as someone talking about these important issues and challenges and this crisis that we're still in the midst of. Is based on the fact that when you speak with a tone of caring from your very first words. And I'm not trying to be too nice to you, but it's easy because I respect you, I adore you, and the service that you are performing is changing lives. There's no better way to say it. And again, your humility won't allow you to agree with that, but I'll say it anyway because I really believe that's the truth. And that's why the analogy to safety, and you responded exactly the way that I would have expected. Be careful. Okay. Now it's be caring. Be careful. Be caring. So there's a dichotomy that maybe needs to be played out because again, the subject of mental health, addiction, suicide, just that whole crisis. Really is under the umbrella of dealing with the fact that people are different. We may not always recognize what those differences are, particularly if it's, as an example, an addiction or a mental health issue. But we still have to recognize differences, and everybody needs to be in. And that's under the banner of what I refer to and talk about quite a bit, and that is inclusion. And then carrying it on to this notion that it's a matter also of social justice. Treating, again, one of your other words was fair, treating people fairly. And that means if someone, demonstrates that they potentially have a problem which needs to be properly understood, properly diagnosed, properly treated, that fairness needs to prevail. And we need to do what we can in order to help them as an industry, and to do it one person at a time. So again, your message is magnified across the industry. And I think that the difference you are making will only help us get to where we need to be. What else do you want to say about where you are in your journey as we come to the close of our time together?
Well, number one, you've been awful generous in your comments, Dennis. I always have been humble, and I appreciate your comments, and I thank you for that. as far as where I am in the journey, I think we continue to make progress. I get frustrated that we're not moving faster as an industry. And the other piece I've been trying to convey to contractors, we're an industry that every day counts, and our employees need to be in their A game. And I compare it to what's going on now in the NFL. I mean, people play hurt, right? They come off the sidelines, they go in the med tent, and next thing they're out on the field. Well, our industry is no different. People play hurt. They just don't want to admit they have an issue because they might not be on the starting lineup. And we have to recognize that that's holding people back. So if people aren't in their A game, this is why we have production issues. This is why we have redo work. I mean, if now again, I looked at things differently. Why did we have redo work? And we typically want to blame the person. Well, let's look at what was going on. Maybe they weren't on their A game. And I think we've gotten smarter with safety. When accidents happen, we used to blame the person. They weren't being careful. Well, now today they're going, geez, maybe they didn't have the right training. Maybe we didn't do all we could to help them be successful. So I think they go together. And I think as long as I can keep giving people some pointers, but also convincing contractors. At one point, people said, well, safety costs money, and then we learned it doesn't. Well, addressing people's needs, mental health, substance, it's going to cost money. No, it's not. It's going to save money. But more than that, what's the cost of losing our people and both losing them as your employees, but maybe losing them as far as an effective person? There's huge costs. So we just got to look at things a little different. And we'll be a better industry. We've been hard on the last piece is recruitment. We have a really tough recruitment. Well, geez, let's say big screen. It's a great industry. It's pretty safe, but we don't take care of our people, and it's hard, and you're going to work long hours, and we would like you to join the team. Mm-hmm. What? Versus we're a caring industry. We want you to succeed, and please sign up on our website.
Yeah,
we got to. It's a recruitment issue, but it's our own fault, and we can fix that. So I'm excited about the future of the industry. I love the industry, and I left the industry, Dennis. I think you know, not because I didn't love it, but I need to do what I'm doing right now. So
and our industry is better for it. Bob, this time went by too quickly.
It sure did.
But again, you know how I feel about you. I'm so grateful that you agreed to be part of this conversation. We just spent time talking about the most important issue facing our industry, in my view, and you are caring, you are reasonable, you are articulate, and I'm sure that as people have an opportunity to listen to our conversation, you'll inspire more people to understand that we have to do things differently. There is a positive future, but it's not going to be positive if we don't embrace our people.
I agree. And Dennis, thank you for letting me be part of this. And kudos to you for stressing soft skills, because we've been a hard industry that we don't need to be that way.
Bob, thank you very much. It's so good to have you on my podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today for this episode of the Soft as Steel podcast with your host, Dennis Duran. Dennis is the author of Soft as Steel and a leading speaker and trainer for organizations across many industries and verticals. To learn more about the work Dennis is doing to activate soft skills in the workplace, contact him at DennisDuranSpeaking.com. Be sure to check out his book, Soft as Steel, on Amazon or wherever books are sold. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or wherever you'd like to get your podcasts. And please remember to share this episode with your friends, colleagues, and anyone you feel would benefit from the conversation. We'll see you next time on the Soft as Steel podcast with Dennis Duran.